I'm Cheyenne Dombrock, and I'm at the amazing Magic Carpet Studios in Nigeria, and I'm a 3D character artist and generalist from South Africa.
Hi everyone, my name is Paula Kalous. I'm a senior lecturer, head of research at the National Centre for Computer Animation at Bournemouth University, and I'm super impressed as well.
Hi guys, my name is Freddie Adimefe. I'm the founder of Magic Carpet Studios, and I'm very interested in telling African stories and making movies that can show the beauty of Africa.
Okay, hi, I'm Chikube Okonkwo Emmanuel, the art director for Magic Carpet Studios. With me here, the beautiful ladies, and my boss, I'm the co-founder of Magic Carpet Studios.
All right, welcome to Nigeria. I think I should start by saying that.
Thanks.
Okay, let's start with you. Tell us about your coming and what you have seen in the animation space from the festival you attended last week. What are you taking away, and what have you seen in the industry now?
I've seen that it's a very fast-growing industry. I think that Nigerian animation has something to bring to the table of animation worldwide, and it's absolutely beautiful. I definitely think that once education facilities and more studios start working together around the world to actually raise up Nigerian animation, it's going to be an incredible industry as a whole. So.
Amazing. Paul, let's start with you as well. You studied animation in East Africa?
Yeah, in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Sub-Saharan Africa, and now you're in West Africa.
Yeah.
What has been your experience?
So like you said, actually, I spent more time on the East, less time in the West. For sure, I think my research has spanned across 10 years. So I've been looking at African animation for the past 10 years, and I think definitely technology plays a really big part in how the landscape has changed in Africa. And typically when you're looking at countries where there is access to internet and access to if you like knowledge through the internet, you can see, if you like, a rapid growth in digital animation, or at least the creation of content in digital spaces. So from my experience, if for example we looked at what was happening in Nairobi before fast connections to the internet, there was a very small, if you like, handful of key artists that were making work. And then afterwards there was like a much rapid growth. Now it's impossible to keep up with how many new people are on the scene making work. And a lot of the creative people are self-taught, which is really interesting as well. So they tend to form communities and networks where they're sharing information with each other and sharing knowledge. Which is really the best way to go. I mean, especially because animation is always such a collaborative thing. I think if you look at how animation works, I think the best animations come from really good teamwork. And if you have a good team of people, it depends on that collaboration. I think, yeah, that's my kind of take.
Checks. I don't know how I ended up being the one interviewing the person, but I think I'll ask what I would like you to speak to is. Okay. You've been in this space 2-3 years and literally pioneering it here in the studio and, making it happen, and now we're training people. So how's the 3-year journey been like for you? And we're doing our first film, which you are directing. I mean, taking such a huge opportunity or taking such a huge risk to have someone with self-thought to put a project of that scale. The teaser was mind-blowing. I mean, we're still getting calls like, you guys are amazing. Are you in Nigeria? We're in Nigeria. It's not true. You guys are not Nigerians. You guys are not doing this here. It's not possible. I mean, I like to say, of course we're in Nigeria. You want to come around, right? And we bring them. But walk us through your own experience.
Okay, the experience for animation for me has been a bit rough, I would say. I started, learning a lot from YouTube, watching a lot of people. We don't have so many 2D animators out there. We have, most guys, dive into 3D animation, and sometimes the difficulty for them is rendering problems. So for me, I thought, okay, I could give it a try for 2D animation. So I started watching a lot of tutorials, started learning basics of 2D animation, bouncing ball, walk circles, and timing and spacing, and those things. And after making my mistakes, because I made a lot of mistakes, I learned from my mistakes, and over time, got hiring a lot of animators, testing few artists, those that were interested. However, not everybody would stay for a very long time. You know, some people like the idea of animation, but cannot really exercise the patience to
It's
make
a labor
animation.
of love.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of sacrifice and time. And so far, so good. I think we've been able to train, you know, a lot of hands in as regards 3D animation and also cutout animation. So we are exploring so many softwares for this purpose. And so far, so good. This is a new space in Nigeria, and it's a new medium. You know, we have Nollywood working for us, so we need, aside from books, African stories need to be told, and animation is one of the mediums that it's really, really fast, rapidly growing here in this country, and we making traditional animation makes it a bit, you know, more relatable for kids. You know, they have something to watch at last. And for Passport of Mallam Illia project, you know, I've been receiving calls and messages as regards to that project, and you know, a lot has gone into it. We've done some voiceovers, and we've merged all the voiceovers together, start preparing concept arts, a lot of concept arts, because we went to Kano for research, and when we came back, we had a whole new perspective of how things work. We could easily go to Google and say, okay, let's just research in Kano, but we had to go there and be a part of that culture to be able to tell the story better. And you know, the book we are making, The Passport of Mallam Illia, is an adaptation from the legendary Cyprian Quincy, who is a very renowned author in Nigeria, and we respect him a lot. So we had to acquire the rights. We went to Ibadan to acquire the rights for the book, and when we got that, we started preparing, you know, drafts, script draft after draft, you know, trying to make this work. And the journey has been endless, because trust me, for animation, even in scripting, there's a lot of back and forth, because you know, there's a lot of time put into it. And
yeah, I think what people don't realize when they're talking about animation is they think it's like cheap to make and quick to make. And I think one of the challenges like most animators face is like, if you think about like Nollywood, everyone talks about how quick the turnaround is. So for example, we met a filmmaker that was saying they would shoot and edit at the same time, and I think with animation, you know, it's so laborious, and people just think, oh yeah, it's like easy to knock out. And so it's really unfortunate, because there isn't sort of that investment. It doesn't attract the money, if you like, especially when you're looking at content like you were talking about, which is like children's content or stuff which is strictly 2D. Yeah. I mean, in London right now, of course, a lot of studios, that kind of their bread and butter is advertising, or else what they're doing is they're servicing like the film industry. True. So they're going into like 3D, and then what they're doing is they're preparing assets and effects and whatnot. And in truth, actually, if you look at like the film industry now, 80% of it, if you want it to be really pedantic, is probably animation.
Do you see any intersection really between filmmaking and even politics? Not in the way that it's, okay, we just have to use it to drive a message, but I feel here in Africa we need to roll back a lot of stereotypes. And on one level, there is still the issue of where not enough tolerance. Our understanding, the religion is strong here, tradition and culture is actually pretty much what it is. So you're here on a mission to track arts
and politics. Right.
So I don't know if you've seen anything you'd like to speak to, because watching, of course, will be a lot of people who create content as well, animators and even artists, and just trying to see how that intersection can play out.
So yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm here working on a HRC funded project called RTOP, and it's looking at the articulations of politics, specifically visual articulations in Nigeria. And that came about really largely actually from a conversation with a postgraduate student of mine who was Nigerian, who was studying in the UK. And we were talking about what he was going to do when he went back home. And he said, well, it's election time, so I'm starting up a company. Because, and so then obviously the conversation ensued, and I was like, well, I don't understand that, what does that mean? And he was like, well, you know, in Nigeria, politics is everything, and whenever it's election time, it's a brilliant time for the creative industries, because that's when the creative industries, if you like, are put to work. in an official capacity, but also in an unofficial capacity. So that also what interested me was this sort of duality between being commissioned, let's say, to as an agency or as a company to make political work in the form of like messages or adverts or public services announcements, but also that you might also, as a company, which is how the story unfolded, be making your own content that doesn't necessarily politically align with the people that are commissioning you. And so I became interested in how different artists were using digital media to tell their own voice, or to have their own voice, but as well, of course, knowing that in a sense your bread and butter is the work that comes in. So how does that play out? So off the back of that conversation, I spent about 7 months developing a grant with Charlie, which we applied for, to look at actually running this project now for 2 years, where we want to collect different evidence of how artists in Nigeria are not just engaging with politics in the sense of the election or like politics with a capital P, but really, as we discovered through conversation, the politics of the stomach, I believe.
Stomach infrastructure.
Yeah. And the politics of the everyday. And it's those kind of stories that we're interested in. So, for example, by looking at your animations today, there are the ones which were, let's say, officially commissioned for. So when you were working with the anti-corruption animation, that's sort of working on an official level. But the very first animations you were making tell a political story, and they tell a political story because they speak of the everyday problems that people face. And it's not like shouting out politics, but it's using storytelling to invite people, I think, to invite young people as well to engage with political discourse without it being necessarily an academic exercise. So, and I think animation does that brilliantly, right?
Very
so
well.
you can
Easily.
put out the message,
true.
and it just, people want to watch it, so they want to engage with it, and it causes conversations around what's being made. I don't know if you agree.
I do, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, especially since the fact of storytelling came from Africa. It goes far back into the actual African rock paintings and tribal stories and storytelling through the generations, and how they actually relayed that throughout the times. And now we've just taken those stories and we want to put them into actual moving animations for the rest of the world to know and understand. And it's just such a great thing to actually get out there to show the world that African animation and African stories and African ideas are strong enough to actually be part of the rest of the world's stories and actually go out there.
Because in fact they work on different levels. So you can make an animation that speaks to a Nigerian audience. So for example, we were talking about the use of language and whether language or access to language is important in understanding the animation. And I would say, for example, the animations we watched today, I was laughing out loud, and even though I don't understand Pidgin English, it's fine, right? You know, we get the gist.
Yeah.
So and that's sort of how animation is able to work. So you can access, you know, it sort of resonates with a Nigerian audience in one way, and even then, actually, we should say, you know, Nigeria itself is a really large country, and there are different audiences within Nigeria. So if we're talking about the north or the south, things are operating in different ways. People are speaking different languages, they have different cultures, they have different practices, and so on and so forth. But for a global perspective, you know, we can still come at it, like me as a British academic, or I should say Maltese academic living in Britain, I could look at that work and I can still engage with those stories, but I will engage with them at a different level in a different way. And I think using the internet and having digital platforms, you really, the access to the audience is so much bigger, and it invites, talking about challenging stereotypes, it invites people from the outside to really reframe the stories about Africa. So, you know, for when I started my research, I would go around to animation festivals and people would say, oh, what are you studying? Oh, I'm doing my research in African animation. And the next question would be, oh, there's animation in Africa. And then, you know, I'd have to correct everybody and say, well, you know, Mustafa Alassane in Niger was making animations in the 1960s. And he was working with Norman McLaren, who's a very big animator, right, in the UK or a Western context. So there are those like ideas that people have in their head around sort of myths, in a sense, of what is Africa. You know, and I think like all of this new stuff that people are making out there is great because it just like flies in the face of all of that.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, Jax, tell us, you know.
Okay, I wanted to say something. Even, you know, when we're talking about storytelling and also exporting culture, as you've mentioned, you know, I remember watching her film, and you know, there's something really unique about her story. And we don't find those elements in storytelling today. All we know about it's happily ever after and the princesses and the prince and all that stuff. So I believe there's a storytelling culture that needs to be told. That's African story. So learning from what she has done, looking at her story about the horse and, you know, the spirit, getting back the soul of the horse back and everything. It's a deep story that, you know, taps into, you know, some certain level of spirituality and morals that really struck us and knew it's actually different from what we are used to. And that's, you know, I believe that's the new era for storytelling in Africa. So I really commend
what I'm hoping we'll do, and I'm glad enough that you guys are doing an amazing work. I so enjoyed your show, and I was looking at the detail. And unfortunately, in here in Nigeria, we don't have any animation school yet. In fact, we are trying to build the first institute of some kind that would help people learn about this. And it's also expanding the way we tell our stories, because Nollywood somehow has framed a generation to think that there's a particular way to do movies. And they always feel animation. Are you guys doing that for kids? Like, that's what they keep asking us. You know, they don't understand that globally, animation is actually not tiny. Mom and dad, please, is not for kids. Right? Because they don't always get it. They will feel like, oh, for kids. But the meaning, is always laced with meaning. What we are hoping to do with Magic Carpet is, yes, people built Disney, and even Triggerfish is being built by a South African. So maybe 10 years down the line, it's as big as what Disney has become today. We want to do the same with Magic Carpet. Like, keep making these movies and scaling up and expanding the way we tell our stories, expanding the stories that are being told, expanding the options. It's not just wicked mother-in-law and wicked daughter-in-law. It has to be more symbolic. But I'm hoping for partnerships. I think our cat story checks if we can plug it together, and we have the story we want to make where we can co-produce that. It could be our first work together.
If you look at, sorry, I'm just thinking about you talking about collaboration. If you look at how Triggerfish started off, so I just say a bit of my background. I was employed by UNESCO many years ago to run animation workshops in South Africa and also in Kenya. It was called Africa Animated, and the idea was that we would train East African artists, and then they would become trainers and they would go on teaching. And so eventually some of our students went off to work on Tinga Tinga Tales. I don't know if you know that, which is a children's animation. It was like a British production company called Tiger Aspect that then came and set up studios in Kenya. But really going back to, so when we were working in South Africa, we worked with Jackie Trowell, who started up Tiger Aspect, Triggerfish, and at the time they were working on Takalani Sesame. And the story of Takalani Sesame was that the company was too small to produce all of the episodes, and their strategy was they had connected with other small animation houses, and they worked collaboratively to bid for a larger project. So I think collaboration is really key to the beginnings of the start of an industry. That although I know Nigerians are very competitive, right? So competition is good, but actually pooling in resources is in my experience, it always leads to better things, because you're doing knowledge sharing, but you're also able to share the resources you have access to. And they grew from being able to be commissioned to work on these series. So they led the project, but they would connect to other animation studios, and then they also set up the Animation Association, which was again all about the community. It was bringing together people that are working in animation and having a forum for everybody to get together. So when I started doing my research, I was collecting the minutes of the meetings that they were having, and at the time they were lobbying with the government to look at, first of all, having the Film Commission to recognize animation in their literature, because they had all this documentation about all the money incentives for filmmakers and what types of films, but there's nowhere in there was there any mention of animation. So there was, as a body, they had more strength, rather than like a small individual here and a small individual there. So what they did is they sort of cohered together, and then as an association they could then lobby with the government. They had much greater force.
Yeah.
I don't know.
From that,
that's an idea
actually,
to really push.
I mean, now it's really big, right?
It is. They've actually ended up producing 2 of the biggest grossing animation films in Africa,
in Africa.
which is Kumba and Zambezia. And those were just the complete outline and the finish line for Triggerfish as a whole to actually get out there into the world. Because, I mean, now they're starting to do partnerships with Pixar, and they're actually getting their name out there to grow even bigger.
Yeah,
And they're
right.
getting a few Emmys out there as well. And
I mean,
it's
we
crazy.
really admire the skill, the work they've done. I constantly read up on them. Chex is always sending me stuff to check out.
yeah.
And I do think that it's something we want to do a better collaboration. Even the movie you're working on, we are having to train people to feed into the talent pool. Because on the project alone, we need a lot of animators.
Yeah.
Right? That's the skill. And we're really looking at coming to London in October. Right?
I hope so. I hope you come to the BFX Festival, which is, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to plug our festival, which is in October in Bournemouth. It's by the seaside. We always have good weather. It's kind of a fluke. The week we have our festival, the sun comes out. And it's a really good program of loads of people from the industry, loads of studios from London, great speakers.
Amazing.
So I hope you all come. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell us about your YouTube. If you have a YouTube channel, where can they find you? Where can you find your works?
So I have a YouTube channel. It's Cheyenne Dombrock. Hopefully you'll put up an actual tag, like down here somewhere on my name. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well. It's got all of my details. It's got my CV and my show reel. So if
Amazing.
anybody's interested in contacting me for any 3D or 3D generalist work,
Okay.
character animation,
So
I'm there.
my own plug out. So Freddie, I'm Freddie Adimefe, and I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, everything as that. And it'd be nice to keep in touch if you have ideas on how Magic Carpet can do anything with you. We'll be glad to work together on that. Chex.
Okay, I think we are both on the same.
Chex is not fit. This is not fit. But thank you guys so much for hanging out, and thank you so much for coming to
Oh, thank
Nigeria.
you. It's
Coming
been
to
great.
Nigeria.
And we'll be back.
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
definitely.
And we have to do stuff together
Yes.
in UK
Yeah.
and in SA.
Yes,
Yeah, that's the plan.
definitely.
Yeah.
And thanks to Adimepe for making this happen. She's somewhere
Yeah.
behind. We can't find her.
Behind
but
the
she's somewhere
camera.
behind the camera.